All these things we are feeding ourselves and feeding our children and supporting out of our own pockets. Violence and these crazy movies that implant those ideas, and all of a sudden we're anti-gun on the other hand. We hate violence on one hand, but we'll go out and support it wholeheartedly with our actions when it comes to the movie production companies. How hypocritical is that?
Young Malcolm on the beat.
America, we have an appetite, a large appetite for firearms, for violence. America has a natural fascination with guns, firearms, and violence. It does. The movie Star Wars came out the holiday season going into 2016 and set box office record numbers in support out of our own pockets. Yes, it did. And the movies trailing right behind that for box office record numbers is Avatar and The Dark Knight. All these movies express extreme violence and extreme use of firearms and guns. Action movies are, and superhero movies that express these extreme ideas of action and extreme ideas of violence. We go out as Americans together and support those. The pro-gun and the anti-gunner together. We go out and spend money to be entertained by these. So how is it that we can have a large percentage or a core group in the country saying we hate guns, we are anti-gun, we are anti-this, we should ban all guns and this, when at the same time we looking at our children and feeding our children all of these movies, feeding our children all of this violence, feeding our children all of these negative stereotypes, feeding our children this on the side, all of the video games, all of the war things, all of the superhero movies, all these things we are feeding ourselves and feeding our children and supporting out of our own pockets. Violence and these crazy movies that implant those ideas, and all of a sudden we're anti-gun on the other hand. We hate violence on one hand, but we'll go out and support it wholeheartedly with our actions when it comes to the movie production companies. How hypocritical is that? But Chris, that's not real life. Duh, I know that's not real life. I know that's not the reality. But when you look at movies, where do they come from? They're based on real things and real events. They're based on actual events. They're based on real people's lives. They're based on high probabilities of these things coming true. They're based off the ideas of this is where we were, this is where we're going, or this is what we want the future to look like. Stop it with that at the end of the day. Chris, this is fantasy. People aren't really doing that or really living like that. Excuse me? Where I come from, people are getting smoked, they're getting their heads blew off. Where I come from, there is a criminal element that's real. What's a reality to you and what you say is fake and not true is real in some of our own lives, and we have to actually deal with that. So who has the higher respect for life? Who has the higher respect for and the higher regard for the realities of what's happening? We can't go out with one hand and say we are anti-gun, we don't want to support that, and on the other hand support that. As a country, we support the most violent sports. As a country, we go out with our children and support the most violent movies, and yet we don't want violence. This doesn't make sense to me. We have to come back to reality. What am I doing? Am I trying to push and put the blame on the movie production companies who run these movies when we support them? Am I trying to shift blame from the stance on gun laws and gun control and gun confiscation off and say, no, it's the movie production's fault, company's fault? No, that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is say, let's not be hypocritical about the debate. We can feel whatever way we want to feel, but at the end of the day, let's not take a position that says, I hate this, and then at the same time, I support it. So what are we saying? I support fictional violence, but I don't support real violence. I support fictional crime waves, but I don't support real crime waves. I'll go out and spend money on being entertained by violence and guns, but I really don't support guns. We got to make some decisions. If we're going to take an anti-gun stance, then let's take that stance by not supporting the things that spreads that stereotype or that idea. You see, remember when hard rock came out, right? And death metal came out. And the whole country was in an uproar. This music era came about and they said, this is the devil's music. This is satanic. This enforces every negative thing about humanity. It's dark. It has a dark image. It has a dark energy behind it. This can inspire or influence someone. And we said, wait a minute, it's just music. And the world said, it doesn't matter if it's just music, it could influence someone. And then rap came out, and within a decade of hip hop and rap music came out, it turned gangster rap, and it got hardcore, and it turned extremely violent and portrayed the image of what was going on in the inner cities. And what did we say? People said it's just music, don't worry about it. And then the country came back in response and it said, but it could influence people to be violent. So let's not look at the movie production companies and all the things that we are feeding our children, the violent video games, the violent movies, the violent everything with that. We're going out as a family and supporting and say, well, it doesn't have influence on us, when we're gonna say that music has an influence on us. I'm just saying, if we're gonna do it, be about it all the way. And if you're not really about it, then don't be about it. But don't try to walk two sides of the line, support it secretly with your dollars, and then turn around and with the other hand say, I hate it and everything it represents, when we like being entertained by it. That's crazy.